Call the meeting to order at 6:02. In front of you, you should have, Chris, you have minutes, I hope,
Yep,
from our November 21st meeting. Not me in December. I'll look for a motion to approve those minutes.
I make the motion to approve one.
I will second the motion.
Hearing a first and a second, any discussion on those minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. We'll move in, we have our recognition of guests, which is Alex Amendola from DEP. Thank you, Alex, for showing up tonight. We haven't seen you in a little bit, so I'm sure we'll have some nice updates and we'll get in some questions for you and all that good stuff. We're gonna go into some old business first. Update on interim trails. So at the November meeting, we talked about the Frog Bridge. And then we also talked about me having it fixed by Public Works. And that has not happened yet for a couple of reasons. And I'm kind of glad it didn't happen because also on Saturday, we had an event at the pavilion. And I had a group of people that had a long time ago had asked about the bridge, and they are a equine group in the area. And they provided me with a drawing of a map that they'd like, I'm not a map, I'm sorry, a drawing of the bridge that they'd like to try to put in. So it is certainly, I'm not quite sure if it's an engineer out drawing or what, but there's some drawback from a town perspective, because it is an unimproved town road. To have an outside group do any work on it, we have to jump through a few hoops, but I literally just got this on Saturday. I haven't had a chance to kind of move up the rails yet. I wanted to bring it to this group. I knew we're meeting. Do we want to try to pursue this particular bridge? I can make a photocopy of it and send it along to everyone. We can certainly try to pursue it, and they would do the work for free. The materials, I'm thinking they're free. I have to kind of hash all that out. But again, another option for that bridge.
What's different from what you originally had planned with that?
I originally had planned with Public Works to go out there, rip out the old bridge, lay out essentially telephone poles as our footing and redo the top of it to make it safe again, because it is not safe at all. This looks very similar. Just some other rock material looks like they're bringing in. Cribbing. So
I'd be interested to see if there's any difference in their basic layout, and because they're well versed in the equine part of riding, and we're more versed in bicycles and pedestrian. So if there's a difference, maybe we can compromise with them together.
okay.
I don't mind having volunteers if they want to volunteer in it, but I think we might have to have town or state overseer.
Well, it is a town unimproved town road, so
So
it would be on our end to do the work. That's why I have to find out if an outside group can actually do it. So for liability purposes, so. And I haven't gone that far yet. I wanted to bring it to this group first, see if they want to pursue it.
I think it's worth pursuing. It looks like.
Just to clarify, Ray, this would be an interim solution, correct? Because Nathan Jacobson is to come out and engineer a permanent solution.
I agree with that, and this might be the engineered part of it. I don't know how engineered this is, Chris. I was gonna send this to him as well, this particular rendition, to see if it would be approved by him. So,
Yeah, because not only would the bridge have to be able to carry weights of a horse and rider, but also emergency vehicles,
right, yeah.
et cetera.
Absolutely, so. If I got the blessing of the group, I'm just gonna kind of run it up the flagpole here and see where we go with it.
I think it's.
Okay,
I don't think we need a motion, just if you said.
no, I literally got this on Saturday, so,
Looks robust.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'll send out a copy to everyone so you can see it. Anything else on the interim trails?
The only thing I'd like to ask Alex about is the status of the log piles out on the Eversource right of ways. There's still a lot of piles. You had mentioned that Deep would be taking care of those at some point. Just wondered where that is on your radar.
I have not been down there to check on how much is left. I guess it would be tough for you to approximate how much is left, but honestly, I'd have to go down there and, I know I just got 2 checks from the guy who's trucking the wood away. So he has been doing something, but I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, there's a good number. I haven't been on the eastern side of the power line down, towards Bochum Road. I was from Ingham Hill northward or
Okay.
westward, and I don't know, at least 6 large piles. It looked like they had been cherry picked, and what's left is firewood.
I will take a look either tomorrow or next week, and I can send you guys an email regarding that. That'd be great.
Thanks.
The only other thing I would add is, since we haven't, and we've talked about this, since we haven't heard from Kim Bradley, that we were going to begin doing some activities ourselves. One in particular, was the event this past weekend, and I think the 70+ people that turned out is good to begin getting some re-energizing is Jason. The volunteers and thanks for coming, John Kutopis. You're there, right?
Glad to be here.
Yep.
All right, John, good. Well, welcome back. So, yeah, we haven't heard from Kim, so we're beginning to do some things regarding the trails on our own. And so soon we should have also materials to close some of the trails in the western core protected area. We have signs already. I have some posts, and this is probably the #1 area to close trails based on the studies that were done. And so just wanted to say that is in the works soon.
So have you not received anything back, any of you from Kim?
No.
Since
Since the last time we had all, yes,
how long ago was that?
that was the summer. I haven't heard anything back.
I would encourage you to email her supervisor. To mention something. Do you want me to, so you could probably just email the deputy commissioner. I think he, Mason Trouble is his name. I would love if you, would email her supervisor about this.
We can definitely do that.
I will do that.
Yeah, and if you can't find his email, I can send it to you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I think we're ready to, Alex, try to convene another work party to put up the perimeter signage. I think you were talking about that at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. Yep. Now's the time to start marking boundaries. So I've been marking other areas, but it's the plan to get it done before leaf out. So over the next month, 6 weeks kind of thing. So I'll probably just send you guys a list of dates, and whoever wants to come can come, whoever doesn't want to come, that's it.
Okay.
So
How many publicize that?
I would just email.
You would email it to me, and then we'll send it to our little group that we have, like our email group that we have. Sure.
What does that entail? Is it,
This,
Yeah, so it would be signage and paint. The overwhelming majority of the boundary is very well marked by either stone walls, pins, drill holes, that kind of thing. There's a few ambiguous spots, but yeah, painting, and signage essentially.
this may be the time to also talk about preparations because we don't have trails yet leaving the old, the Ingham Hill parking lot yet. And so I don't know, Ray, if you're prepared to work with Public Works on getting that ready, the kiosk sign moved, the opening of the
I had talked to Public Works with, regarding that stuff. The holidays hit and then the snowstorm hit and then we froze, so I'm not sure we can. I'm sure we can dig a little bit, but don't get me wrong, but, yes, we had talked about it, we just didn't get it going yet. So,
I mean, I'm just, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but in order for the old parking lot area to be used, if that's to be the landing area for lumbering stand 10, the move of the kiosk and the creation of the new trail from the main parking lot will need to be done. And so a couple things we need from you, Alex, are the shape files for the trails, if you're willing to share those with Lynette Wacker of the town. We need those.
Including the illegal ones or the unknown ones, the full layer,
I think the whole layer would be great.
the one that's on that big map we just had.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Because we'll need to create a new map of the interim trails this year at that parking lot. And so those shape files of the trails that your intern did would be very useful for us.
Yeah, especially giving up our signs that say under restoration, no longer, trail no longer used.
anything else on interim trails?
The only thing I still have, not liking, but all the materials are frozen into the ground. All except boards.
The board
There you go, up there.
For the bridge.
Oh, for that, yeah, for
Yeah.
the bridges on the parking lot.
Yeah.
So, once it thaws out, finally, because my shoulder's starting to work again, I can get to work on that. Apologize, it's taking so long.
That's gonna be part of Public Works doing that as for helping getting all this stuff down there and getting that done too.
I think it just footing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So we'll get that going. Good, moving on. So I have nothing new on weed control management or mountain bike community at this point in time. I really wanted to get into the new business with Alex with the forest management plan. So as I emailed everyone today and in your packet that you have in front of them, as I said to Alex, you just wanted to have Alex give a little overview on his, what's been going on with the forest management plan. And also talk about stand 10, because we've been talking about stand 10 a little bit. We know it is the first stand that is slated to be worked on and harvested. So that's why you have that in front of you. And then just on the back of that particular thing is the general property recommendations for the whole plan. So everyone has that. So you're well aware what is to go on from there. So I just want to kind of turn it over to Alex about the forest management plan, where he's at, what's been going on. Since it is fully approved at this point in time, we can move on to our other steps that we need to do.
Yes, fully approved through the CMC.
Correct. Okay, well, this is good. Why? Go
Yeah.
on with it, yeah.
Yeah, so everybody probably is aware that it was approved through the CMC last month. And so I then wrote what's called an FYRA for your review and approval, which goes up to the deputy commissioner. And yeah, the deputy commissioner who's in charge of deep essentially. So it is currently on his desk and has not technically been signed off on yet. However, we do anticipate that that will be done within the next 2 weeks, something like that. Bureaucracy and whatnot. So that's where we are with that.
Does that just get reviewed by him or does that go to other departments as well?
Everybody else has already reviewed it.
Okay.
This is just the final signature on the front of the plan. That's like, okay, it will now be actually ratified and then like, we can actually over what's prescribed here.
Understood.
So we're right at the precipice. So once that happens, so there's actually, we kind of glossed over the weed control quickly, but there are invasive treatments also.
Yep.
Yeah, prescribed for 2025, a pretty ambitious schedule. So all of these will probably not happen, but those are other things. I just wanted to note that. So.
And that's gonna be on the state to do those?
Yeah, the funding, I'm assuming we're probably gonna use some of the stewardship funds to do.
Yep.
Yeah, because those again will be unlocked or theoretically are unlocked past the CMC, but yeah, there's a bunch.
I mean, there's 7, 8.
Yeah.
Different stands marked up for that. in
Well,
2025.
The fortunate thing is if you tally up the acreage though, it's really not that extreme. I mean,
Sure.
it's like 50 acres, maybe something like that.
Okay.
It's not that large, and this would all be contractor. Where essentially I would put out a request for a proposal. And then it would go to the CMC to review it, and then if it was approved, then you can see contractors and that kind of
And
thing.
is that mechanical or chemical or both?
Depends, in many cases, like with the spurge, I don't know if the spurge is even, I think we do call for the spurge, general property recommendations. It's somewhere in here, but that area is probably gonna have to be chemical. I'm not opposed to chemical treatments for a lot of these areas, especially dense barberry. But that's why it's gonna go through the CMC.
Yeah.
We'll cross those bridges when we get to them. So anyway, that's, I just wanted to bring that to attention too, that those are also action items for next year. Another action item that, before I get to the stand 10 is, we did get a proposal from Dr. Clemens for the next round of sampling, and that's currently pretty much the same as the plan. Just waiting to see if that gets approved. And then we use the stewardship funds for that.
And that went through just you?
He just sent the proposal and I essentially just needed to get approval that then we could bring it to the CMC.
Oh.
But can't really tell, as you know, Dr. Clemens, Dennis have to plan ahead for the spring season. Until the management plan is passed, I can't officially tell him that he would get paid and so
We'll work on that. Yeah, that's the step.
yeah, so working on that, but that's just another action item. And then, okay, so stand 10 here. So everybody is curious as to the process. So there's a bunch of information here, some of which you may understand, some you may not.
Ask you a question before you.
Yeah, far away.
Go backing up to the invasive.
Yep.
I'm looking at this means, a variable invasive in the stand, right? Because it says plant, and I'm thinking one particular invasive, and it's really.
It would be any,
Several varieties.
yeah, we're not going to go into a stand that has bittersweet barberry and only
Okay,
bittersweet.
that's what it was, but I'm looking at it now.
So I think the thing we'll have to do on all of those, like in each individual description of the stands in the plan, we give what they, obviously gonna go on each.
And even if it's not specifically in the stands,
Something.
Yeah.
it will be.
Okay.
We're not, we kind of mentioned before, the management plan is really kind of a guiding document. And during the RFPs and the inventory mapping out the areas that we're actually gonna have treated would be, then I'm saying, okay, there's X, Y, and Z present, we want these to be treated, and we want it to be for 3 years or however. we get to it.
Gotcha.
But all that again would go through that CMC after I. So stand 10, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to do that, want that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, right? Just so I can show everybody knows what we're talking about.
We'll put you to work today, Joe. This particular map is the one with all the trails on it, that's the
Yeah,
yellow.
and ignore the numbers, those are the vernal pool numbers, not the stand numbers. Stand 10 is essentially in here, kind of the central upland area. You can see the green in here, so about so it's the upland essentially surrounding 7. So Yeah, and it is 81.5 acres, although if you look back, specifically calls out 50 acres of stand 10 to be treated with various silviculture treatments. So only about 2/3 of the stand will be treated. And I don't believe Eric actually called out which part of the stand, but I'm assuming for it, he probably removed acreage based on not the vernal pools, I would think, but just the wetlands layer prior. So I'm assuming.
So we'll keep that up for.
This might be easy to look at,
Yeah,
because it has less going on it.
okay.
So the process going forward here, so stand 10, assuming the management plan is approved, which it will be signed off on. The next part of the process is stand 10, which again, just imagine this general area. If you remember the map of the gray boundaries is the stand map.
Yeah.
I will go out there and re-inventory. This inventory data is not really out of date. It's 6 years old, but we re-inventory any stand that we're going to put to an operation plan with a little higher level scrutiny. So we get a little bit more specific data. And then essentially, I would come up with an operations plan. That operations plan would entail exactly what we're going to do, a stand specific map. So it would remove any areas that aren't captured with the GIS data. You know, we already know we're going to be buffering wetlands, we're going to be buffering vernal pools, but if there's areas I deem inoperable or don't make any sense, those will be removed. So the acreage is probably going to decrease further than 50 acres, would be my guess. And then once the operations plan, and this operation plan, I should have brought one so you guys can see it. They're pretty robust. I mean, they go through, water quality issues, erosion issues, NDDB review would have to do another NDDB review for endangered species. And once I essentially put all that together, it would go to the CMC, everybody could look at it, and no trees would be marked until that was approved by the CMC. And then at which point it would then go out to bid and that kind of thing. So
Is it similar to a review process that it's a 30-day review after, or?
different, no, it's not, there's no public comment period, really. It's
Okay.
just, so when I do the operation plan, I will initially go out to deep wildlife, fisheries, parks, and operations. And then once it goes through once it goes through all them, they sign off on it. It's kind of a draft plan. Then that plan would go to my supervisor, Will, and you to take a look at. And then at that point, you guys, the CMC, would either approve it or object to it, or however.
But stand 10 is basically above the well top.
Correct.
Right, and then that number 27, that's the vernal pool, that's a year round. And some deep pools, right? It's kind of there's rock wall basically all throughout that area.
Yes, I believe you're correct. It is, you'll probably notice that very small buffer around it because it is a exceedingly unproductive pool.
Really?
Yes, yep, that's why the decision was made to not buffer it, so not as extremely as.
That's 100-foot buffer.
It's 100 foot, yeah, correct, where you can see like 26 here, it's the 400 foot buffer, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that one there, it has, the only sections of vernal pools that I've encountered that have 5 feet of depth.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree, I'm not disagreeing with you, but the data for that, I wish I had it, I'm almost positive. I think 20 years ago, it was low productivity and it was lower this time. It's kind of almost a little bit of an island. There's a lot of connectivity between these pools, like these pools here, these pools, and that pool, because it's so, you've all walked in very, very uplands, ledgy, very, very thin soils, it's not retaining a lot of moisture. And so it's kind of not exceedingly surprising that climate change, other factors, that's kind of one of the first pools to fall off in terms of productivity. And that's why, it was a joint decision. Dr. Clemens, I believe it was his idea to take this pool out, that it wasn't really worth.
But is no connectivity with the.
Well, it's longer than it looks there, I mean.
Well, I mean, it is-
Dog goes
it is
swimming
pretty.
it all the time, and I try to get the dog out, but they actually go underwater, I mean, it's deep.
You swim in that?
No,
pool?
my dog-
Well,
And I try to stop, it,
yeah,
in the summer, it's, you know, it's things, but I'm saying it's a product. I don't know, other than frogs, you know, what to look for in there, but.
well, the productivity numbers are based generally on salamanders and, you know, wood frogs and other species of frogs aren't really the best indicator of, vernal pool productivity or health. And, like I said, I want to say there was like 4 egg masses there 20 years ago, maybe 0 this time around. You know, and you're talking, some of these other pools had hundreds. I mean, we all know other pools here that I'm not going to point out are much more productive. Yeah, that's again, this is still a 100-foot buffer around it, you know, again, you've all walked this trail. Pequot Swamp, we know there's a lot of migration critters to and from. We all know what the east side of Pequot Swamp looks like. There's no turtles or salamanders that are climbing those cliffs. So, despite the fact that a lot of the critters we've seen are pretty tough, they're not making that climb. So that's why 27 is a little bit smaller than others.
Alex, do you know if Stanton goes into the town property though? It doesn't, right? You wouldn't.
I mean, technically, it probably does in terms of how we define forest stands, but no, the town property is the town property. Yeah.
Nothing would happen.
And that's the red.
That's the red square.
Yep, yeah, so there would be, yeah, I mean, that's, operation would end at that one. Other question, I mean, again, so this is, just so the cliff notes are, the next step is I have to do a more detailed inventory. And once the more detailed inventory and operation plan is completed, you will see the operation plan in front of all of you. And at which point you can review what's actually going to happen. And as you can see,
So I guess for one main question that's on top of my head, besides you doing what you have to do, it's 2025. Is this a
Well,
realistic thing this year or?
that's a
is it
great
not?
question, and one that I've discussed with my superiors. Is it realistic that we will have an operation plan? You know, detailed inventory operation plan and something that we can all take a look at, discuss? Absolutely, but, you know, is there going to be work happening on the ground? It might be wishful thinking.
Yeah. Cause you're also limited to when you can do the work.
That it's, yeah, dependent on the NDEP review, and I would assume. I mean, I know this falls into at least one, and at least one, and not to mention, acoustic monitoring has to be done for this area for, that species, you know, which I would also do, and, that not be done until. So right there, that's what's happening.
Half the year.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's an extensive process.
Okay.
But,
I don't mean to be one dimensional on this one topic, but that area that we're looking at is heavily used by farmers. In doing that. And I know most people that go in through the upper parking lot, walk all those. Probably like 1 hour. Will they, is there any care given rocket tree that you could pass open?
if it is a sanctioned trail, one of the approved trails, absolutely, it's in the BMDs, it's written into the operation plan, that they cannot be a mess on the trails, they cannot be across the trail, they cannot utilize the trails to move. If they're dragging a tree, they cannot destroy the trails. If they're a non-known or illegal trail, all bets are off. But
Right now, it's really just the road that are.
Well, that section of Stan 10 is essentially our part of our loop on our approved trails. So, yeah. It's the main part that people use.
I mean, you know, that's. But so when I say that, you know, obviously, any silvicultural activity that's been done in the state forest in the past 50 years has been areas with trails. You know, every harvest I've ever done is a trail.
Yeah.
In general, again, like I said, like I just did some harvests in the Hampton State Forest, and all the trails, there's blue trail, several different blue trails that go through there, which were all protected. And there were illegal, recently created trails, which I chose to have the operator bury during the course of that activity. But this is kind of the point of these operation plans is we can talk about, oh, this trail is one we're trying to get approved. And it's very easy for me to say, okay, well, this trail is something that don't have. Delete it.
Right, I think we're all under the assumption that we're not talking about,
No, it's not.
so there is some discretion.
Of course, yeah, and again, it's not the entirety of the stand, and there's several different treatments prescribed here. So it's gonna be variable density of what happens, but it's essentially, as I will be the supervisor of this, any objectives that you all do with CMC want to see out of this, and it's, the preservation of certain trails that, you can make that happen. It's not something that.
I've seen it actually, mark them all.
The trees, every single tree will be marked by me personally. Yeah. Well, that's when it goes to the bid process. So I'll be able to give you a rough estimate of what we kind of like expect. Once the trees are tallied, so I mark every tree and then actually quantify what's there in terms of material will be removed. And then we send it out to an independent, bid process. And then once, maybe 2 weeks and several different contractors generally will come in with bids. The high bidder generally, unless there's someone who had a bad experience with, in which case we do have unscrupulous folks that we do not work with. And
So then what's the money?
goes into back into the search.
We have a,
Yep, all the money, any revenue, just like the revenue from whatever source did, all goes right back into the management property. Yep.
so the prescription of what is here for stands for six, I get what thinning is.
Yep.
I have no idea what crop tree release is.
So a crop tree release, I'm gonna assume Eric threw that in there, and I know Eric Hansen.
Yeah.
This one very well. I'm assuming there's very likely some, I don't want to use the term specimen trees, but there's probably some eastern red cedar. Eastern red cedar, maybe big tooth aspen, a few lesser common species, but very ecologically valuable species. And we call a crop tree release, very common utilization of crop tree release is when somebody buys a piece of land and wants to create a sugar bush or create maple syrup. They'll do a crop tree release where they will release, they'll target sugar maples and release just either 2 to 3 sides of those sugar maples to increase their vigor, their production kind of thing. So it's really a little bit more of like a species targeted, and our crop trees may be, like I said, eastern red cedar, which is something we want for wildlife value, for an oak or big tooth aspen, which we want to create, dense habitat, that kind of thing. It could even be some legacy trees, that kind of thing. It's really just, I don't want to call it single tree selection because that's a whole different thing, but it's actually the crop trees are just what you want to leave. So you're releasing them from the pressure of their neighbors, which are generally trees of lower quality.
And laurel treatment is that,
So the laurel treatment, I know this has been a little bit of a contentious thing. So mountain laurel, generally in many of our operations, if we are looking to create, so there's 2 different types of operations. So everybody knows, we're building 2 different types of silviculture. There's what they call tending, which is a thinning, where you're not restarting the forest. You just want the forest to continue, but you want the trees to be vigorous. You want them to increase their growth, produce more acorns, that kind of thing. Or regeneration type work, which is emulating a stand-ending disturbance, whether that be like a Los Angeles wildfire or a 100-year hurricane, something like that. That's a regeneration treatment. You regenerate the next level of forest, if that makes sense. So generally, in regenerative harvests, we take out a lot of mountain laurel, because mountain laurel, I don't want to get like on a crazy tangent about the ecology of mountain laurel, but mountain laurel generally got destroyed in a lot of those disturbances. It's kind of the intermediate fuel in a big forest fire. If you can imagine, you get the duff layer, and then you've got the shrub layer that then jumps into the ground. If it's an extreme stand ending kind of fire, we tend to remove a lot of it. Generally, that's written into our contracts. However, in a thinning operation, a tending operation, we generally leave it alone, because at that point, we're not looking to establish new trees on the forest floor. Does that make sense to everybody here? So I know in here we have, so thinning is the predominant treatment of this operation. There is I noticed Eric, like canopy gaps, and I did not read through the entirety of what he described here, and I said it to Ray prior to us starting, that I deal with a lot of different forest stands, so prior to the inventory, I'll read exactly what his prescription was, but canopy gaps generally does essentially point to the fact that he was trying to establish some degree of regeneration. But what I'm seeing here is, and so we may have to remove some laurel in those areas if we're trying to establish some regeneration. But the primary treatment here is a thinning. The vast majority of the laurel likely would not have to be harmed.
Just
Quite a bit of it.
Yeah, oh, I understand entirely, and I can't say that none of it's going to be
We're
injured.
looking at it from a diversity point of view.
Yep, yep.
And I'm still struggling even from day one since we first spoke together. The cost of board feed
Mhm.
and what species you want and how you want that to grow versus we have a diversity of more species of trees in which isn't normally harvested for board. And then we're, of course, Chris has been very articulate with this with the 100-year growth of that one area of laurel that is just fantastic. You don't see it very often. So as stewards, we want to try to protect all of that. And we're looking at when we hear harvesting and thinning, and it's like it's counter. And I know we're trying to do the health of the forest as a whole, but we have such a finite acreage of some of these that it scares the bejeebies out of me when I hear harvesting and thinning, and it's not because I understand. I mean, I can contemplate all of the whys and hows, but I just, it still
I
scares the
understand.
bejeebies out of me.
I understand where you're coming from entirely. It's important to remember that the operations we're trying to perform here again are emulating what would naturally happen in a oak hickory stand that contains a lot of mountain laurel. You know, we talk about this all the time. This is kind of a coastal forest, which really would theoretically, historically be subjected to more disturbance than somewhere, a Hemlock Valley, kind of the northwest corner. So the oak hickory forest is really predicated on that kind of disturbance. The laurel is an essential component of it. But so you have to think about it a little bit in geological time, in that, yes, if we don't do any of these operations now, we may see, have the laurel for another 50, 60 years, 100 years, I may be gone. But the percentage of trees like oak, hickory, paper birch, eastern red cedar is another great example, will continue to decline. And that's we're actively trying to emulate these natural processes to get away from that decline and keep oak, hickory, other species where they're supposed to be, where they would naturally be. Because you have to imagine, even in my lifetime, prior to this past century, the preserve very likely would have burned at least once, if not twice. And during that process, if it was not a horrifically severe fire, the trees that would be removed during the thinning are predominantly beech, birch, red maple, very thin bark species, which would have been killed by those fires. We folks who survived. So again, emulating this ecological process. We're not just trying to remove the laurel because we want to get rid of it. You know, and I'm not saying we have to get rid of all of it at all, you know, because there historically would have been old growth areas or older growth areas. I don't want to use the term old growth because it's become a political term, but you know, trees that have outlived or shrubs that have outlived their pathological life. And obviously we want to retain areas like that. So, you know, in this treatment, stand 10 is not going to be wiped out of mountain. And if it's important, we can do an operation plan that we want to preserve this area, this area, this area. But again, it's also important to preserve what would be the natural process of that stand, this particular forest type. You know, it's a difference.
I put you on that spot, so it would be recorded, because I know of the many people that we had at our meeting for stewardship, and you can find it very nicely, thank you. Just wanted to let you know, but your transparency, but also it's, we know that the reserve has stands out, and well, I'll just pick one out of the hat, for beach.
Mhm.
And it wasn't necessarily 200 years ago that much beach in the river's grown now, how it's grown.
And it's not going to be.
And
Pretty
it,
soon
yes,
now.
and we now know that it
Yeah.
is in extreme danger.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what you're saying is important. And how we can try to save the remaining beach if it's possible, but also leave it so that something else can easily grow in its place that's supposed to be native to what.
Right, and so if you think about, you bring up the beach here, beach leaf disease, obviously beach already have beach bark disease, but they're really hurting now with beach leaf disease, hurting their ability to photosynthesize effectively. So if you think about it, losing the beach is a forest disturbance. Obviously, it's not really a natural one because we've kind of anthropogenic created it through global trade, that kind of thing. But if you imagine that disturbance, you pull all the beach out of the forest, what's probably going to see them now naturally is likely going to be predominantly birch and red maple. And those again are species that, yes, they are pioneers that jump in and whisper seed, but those trees may come up and say, you know, 100 birch, 100 red maple, and 5 or 6 oaks are able to take over in those areas with the beech have now died off. We want those oaks to really survive a lot more than the birch and the beech, and the fire would then come in and kind of take care of those birch and beech, but that's not going to happen. So that's kind of why we're trying to steward forests to the direction it's really supposed to be prior to us doing here. It's a complex system, but making the conscious choice to do nothing, we're again going to increase the composition of beech or birch and red maple, which are not anywhere near as ecological value as some other species.
For their normal lifespan, it's in the street.
Correct. Yeah, not even close.
So, I mean, I understand that, but I'm also looking at it from being a long time Audubon.
Yep.
You know, there are certain species of migratory birds that prefer your beach, that
Yep.
prefer
Oh, yeah.
the
I'm very
birch, that
sad.
prefer the red oak, I mean, the red maples because of the now redesigned migratory route that they have to take.
But the thing is, birch and red maple are always going to remain part of the canopy. Red oak, eastern red cedar, pitch pine, my favorite example, although we don't have any except that one in the power line right
Yeah.
away, are trees that will just continue to decline. And it's tough because you have to really look 300, 400, 500 years in the future. Another great example is the tulip trees.
Mhm.
We all love the tulip trees that are kind of near the Ingham Hill parking lot there. They're another pioneer kind of species with thick bark, and they're very fire resistant species. So that's kind of another thing. They need sunlight to really reproduce. So that's just another species that would continue to decline, where birch end up usurping one spot in the forest.
Is there a forest fire reported in that preserved space?
I would say faster, but not that.
Very limited in the 60 years I've been here. You know, just spot forest fires, little things that normally towns between Essex, say, if we're going in Indian Place and take them up within a day or so. But nothing like gigantic, like that happened over 100 years ago in Massachusetts. And that, mostly it's been logged,
Yeah.
and you could see that.
Yep.
You see in some of the trees that actually sprung up after, you know, a 100-year logging, but that's part of the problem. And I gave you that money, that time here, because I know there are other people who are things that, come into this meeting later and listen to it. Thank you for that. I'll let you go on now.
Well, really, feel free to continue to ask questions. The process, like you said, is pretty simple going forward here. It's just, I mean, the next step is really just me.
Yeah,
Taking
I have a few questions and observations,
Fire away.
if I may. So I guess I'll just go through some of these. In the plan, there's not a discussion of exactly what is a herbicide treatment and what are the chemicals to be used. And I know that most of the chemicals used today have a very short half-life and don't impact the groundwater, but it was proved during the development era of the preserve that groundwater is fairly shallow, meaning close to the surface, and that there's a surface to groundwater to drinking well connection, particularly over in Leatta Woods and Deer Run Roads areas, which are just a little sort of south of Stand 10. So I know they're concerned, of course, about could herbicides, affect my drinking water. And I think you just should be aware that you'll get those questions. And I'm assuming you're going to be doing a public meeting again, just like you did for Nahantic when you did the work plan there. And that we'll have another public meeting again for this work plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the public meeting or the outreach meeting for an operation plan typically is, or does not happen until the trees are marked. So it will be, this is like post approval of the CMC, and then the trees are marked, and we do it that way so people can actually see what's going to happen in the field. But
Yeah.
yes, there would be an outreach event, all the abutters would be invited, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, we'll want to this time to get out a press release and do a lot of good advertising of the event, especially everybody down Ingham Hill Road. Just things to be aware of, I think, would be, I'm assuming you'd enter at the small parking lot area off Ingham Hill Road. I'm not sure exactly where your landing area for logs would be, but that is a box turtle area for the NDDB. You'll find that. It's right next to that vernal pool, so you'll have to take measures to protect the vernal pool there. There's also the safety issue, I think, of large logging trucks and the school buses that use that road. Together, they're too large. They have to stop and bypass each other. So most likely there'd have to be some signage, especially around the curve and coming up the hill.
We typically do signage. I have a bunch of signage in my office that we use for areas like this.
And I know, Ray, you're still planning on putting a gate there at some point. And, and in order to really do Stand 10, we have to finish the work in the regular parking lot, getting the trail from the regular parking lot into the woods. Because right now, most people walk the road and through the small parking lot to get to the trail system. So that issue will have to be worked on to get ready for any harvesting, is the use, because really there's not use and access now from the main parking lot. I have a question. Is what happens if bats are found in the acoustic monitoring? What do you do next? Is a question. I'll just go through my questions first.
Want to answer them? I mean, I can answer that.
Let me just go through my questions and on the mountain laurel treatment, it talks about stripping and thinning. I assume that's what that means. It did actually go through a major disturbance in 2013 and 14. We had huge snows, you might remember, on the shoreline. I'll say approximately 50% of the old growth mountain laurel got destroyed, and they're just now coming back. It is one of the few real dense thicket areas in the preserve. I personally, and it was an amazing thing that I witnessed, went into that dense thicket laurel area in stand 10, and I witnessed the birth of 2 deer. I had the situation where I didn't know what to do. I came into the mountain laurel thicket and there was a little opening. Mother was laying on the ground. There was one deer, one fawn that wasn't moving. Looked sick to me, but there was one fawn that then walked directly to me and put its one hoof on my shoe
How sweet is that?
in that mountain laurel thicket. So deer take refuge there. It was probably my most amazing wildlife experience I've ever had in the preserve. I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, and we do want to take hikes in those old growth mountain laurel areas, and they're well known. Maybe we should have a walk of this area. I suggest this group, and maybe with Alex, to actually go and see these areas before the plan is put together. There are the standpipes, Ray, and it was part of the plan to remove the standpipes that go down to the groundwater. So I'm just questioning whether that would be part of the process of stand 10, is to remove those standpipes at that time. Let's see here. Hold on one second. I imagine too that you would have to contact the State Office of Historical Preservation, as was in the plan, to make sure there aren't any of the Native American sites in that stand 10 area. So I'd be curious, just how you go about that in other forests, and what you do. Because we know there are numerous Native American sites there, the hunting and gathering sites. There are no encampments, but there are 4 to 5 hunting and gathering sites, and that would have to be done as well. So I think I've gone through my questions there, so a lot will have to be done. The other really that came up is would you be willing to start before any initiation of forestry? I don't know when this would be next year, whether it would be in the summer or the fall, but if we have another drought period, I would think we'd want to be well coordinated between Old Saybrook fire departments, Essex fire departments, Westbrook fire departments, to really get started with the emergency management plan, which is required by the conservation easement.
Is that it?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, well, let me go through them one by one. I tried to write them down. So bats, first thing, if bats are detected, if they are specific species of bats. There's restrictions on when work can be done, depending on the species of bats. Obviously, like I said, the Myotis species, so northern long-eared bat, the federally endangered ones are the really important ones. Very high likelihood on the coast that we probably will detect them, and that generally restricts any operations to winter months. I believe it's the end of October until March, I think, is the only time, something like that, to avoid any impact on them. And that, as soon as that happens, so that's, again, I do the acoustic monitoring. That goes to Dr. Devon Frazier, who's our bat biologist. And she's gonna do the analysis of the calls after I send her the info. And then that will kind of come, that's all part of like the NDDB process. So that, you know, the turtles and stuff will also be rolled in with that, which and the turtles may also have separate restrictions. And that may be monitoring for turtles or seasonal restrictions, which very well may be the same thing, winter only restrictions. So
The bat monitor, is that like a 1 week thing, a month thing?
so it's actually technically it's a 2-week thing, but if you use 2 monitors, it's a 1 week.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but it's a whole ordeal because you have to have, there's very specific weather conditions. If it rains, that day doesn't count. If it drops below a certain temperature, that doesn't count. So it's complex.
Okay.
Yeah. You also have to find the exact perfect spot to put the microphone. It's a whole ordeal. Yeah.
Alex, would you be opposed if we were able to find funding to embark on some of the recommendations that Dr. Valou suggested about doing additional bat studies in the preserve, particularly eastern red bat, to do telemetry work?
That question is probably above my pay grade. To me personally, it's not going to really affect. I mean, it's all beneficial data. Theoretically, over the course of this management plan, acoustic monitoring would essentially be done almost across the entirety of the preserve, at least I mean, you would have enough
Right.
to probably pick up all the species. I'm not sure it's entirely necessary, but I mean, more data is never a bad thing. That's my
Well, what that telemetry would do, just as with the turtles, it would actually show where the roosting areas are. And therefore you would actually then preserve those roosting areas. Acoustic monitoring would just tell you if they're there, but you would go the next step to find if, eastern red bat, which is a species of concern, and there were more numbers of those than the Myotis.
yeah, the tree bats, so eastern red bats are tree bats. They're kind of an interesting one in that so if any operations happen during the winter, those bats generally are not using trees unless it's a usually warm period, which it is very odd when you see bats feeding in January, which I have. I don't know what they're doing, but anyway, so I understand where you're coming from, and it would be nice to know the roost trees. The roost trees are almost exclusively shagbark hickory, specific cavity trees for older sugar maples with the very, very plate kind of mark go underneath. Those trees are typically retained anyway, I will say, all the time, cavity trees specifically. But I have no issue with it. I think, the more data, the better, as far as I'm concerned, so.
Okay, well, that may be something we may want to consider in the future. And what about go ahead. Go ahead with your list.
Yeah, well, anybody else got anything on bats? I'm gonna move on to mountain laurel. So I'd be happy to take a walk to walk around, the stands of laurel that you find particularly fantastic. You said that, did you say? So when you said cutting the laurel in strips, that doesn't mean physically cutting strips off the laurel. It would be
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It said stripping in the thing that Eric did. It said stripping laurel.
Yeah, cut them in strips or patches, and that would essentially just be a little bit more of an aesthetic way to try to establish. So he mentions kind of trying to establish some regeneration, so this would be a kind of an uneven age management scheme across the stand, but where we would want to establish some canopy gaps for regeneration. He just suggested cutting strips or patches, again, which could be a more aesthetically pleasing way of doing it, or a way where we could kind of, relegate or, say, okay, we don't, this laurel isn't as impressive as this laurel. We want to keep the really fantastic stuff here. So that's not necessarily written in stone, and that's kind of more of a suggestion. It's just an aesthetic way of removing some of the laurel, depending on how intense of an operation you want to perform. So that's all stuff that in the operation plan, we can really kind of decide. But a walk out there, getting some, kind of GPS locations and things, polygons would help to really put a point on this prescription and figure out what would be the best of both worlds. So. Good, Laurel. Any other questions, Laurel? So the native sites, it's kind of a tough question. So generally, I mean, the whole point of when we do these operations, and specifically when we do them in the winter or when succeeding, or we try to do them in the winter or when it's exceedingly dry, because there's then no ground impact. And it's generally the thought of not just the state of Connecticut, but anthropologists, that you're better off not, you really don't need to. I mean, anything above ground, if there's stone structures above ground, obviously you want to screw with them, but anything that's subterranean is generally so far subterranean that what you're doing on the surface is largely inconsequential, especially again, if the ground is frozen or dry. And if there were to be any negative, deleterious groundwork, it would never get to that point. Is what I'm trying to say. We're not going to allow any sort of, tires going down into the soil, that kind of thing. I mean, it's all going to be done surface level. The whole goal is to not disturb anything that's subterranean. So that's the general consensus throughout deep. That essentially you just kind of leave, they're so deep that you just leave them as is.
Wouldn't a inquiry of the Office of State Historic Preservation, they would identify those sites that were found by the archaeological report, and then
They're identified in that report, aren't they?
They are, but you mentioned in the plan that you would actually be consulting with the office, and I would assume then that these areas would then just be avoided.
So again, it kind of depends on the degree of the site. Like you mentioned before, it's not like there's a village site, Shellfish Minion, that it's very clear that there's thousands of years of civilization. In that report, if you'll recall, I believe across the preserve, they found, several pottery shards, and probably piece of one, a plate or a piece of one chert knife, if I recall correctly, and several quartz crystals, which was cool. But there was no real evidence of such a level of human habitation that I think really warranted. I mean, they do recommend, you could cap those areas if you really wanted to ensure that nothing was to happen to them. I would be happy to bring it up with the anthropologist's office, the archaeologist's office, but I'm going to assume he will probably just say similarly to what I'm saying, that they're, not really. I don't want to use the term inconsequential, because they're obviously not. But I think we would just say, they're buried sites. They're fine as is, and what you're doing, as long as you're doing it correctly, won't disturb them at all. But again, I will have no problem running it by him.
Just curious, is what your normal protocol is?
Generally, unless they're very significant, and like a good example is one of the operations recently in Niantic has, well, and this is a little up for debate, but although there's subterranean Native American areas everywhere across the state. I mean, across all of Connecticut, they
Yeah.
routinely, anything. So we have in Niantic, and Patchogue also has some, there are some controversial stone structures that
Yeah.
you can see visibly. And those are,
Avoided.
yes, very much so. They're all flagged, mapped, and avoided. The last harvest that I just showed to contractors 2 months ago it's 40 acres, 42 acres, and has like 125 stone
Yeah.
structures on it. Every one of them is flagged and marked, and it's written in the contract that none of them are to be touched. And so that's kind of because those are so high profile, that kind of warrants a little extra attention. But again, and there is a database, of course, of some of the more, and I don't really want to mention them on this call, but some of the more extreme or known, multiple thousands of years, generational village sites.
Yeah.
Those kind of things it's a rarity. But
Yeah.
again, I would be happy to pass it by and see what it says. Unfortunately, they're a rarity. It's pretty cool. Any other questions on that?
I have another question.
Yeah.
Okay, just getting back to, the income from selling the tree.
Yep.
It goes into this fund.
Correct.
The two goals in front, what is it? What is the fund?
It's
focused on?
the CMC.
The CMC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know how much is in the fund currently?
Don't, there's only been a few deposits into it.
Yeah, I think, well, from the wood that went first, we got rid of from the power line thus far. I want to say it's like 10,000 or something like that, maybe a little bit more than that. So, and that was, out of the Eversource guys really did a job on that stuff. So that was a pretty meager return.
Something we can find out.
Yeah,
We can-
I want to say it's right around 10. That was my thought, something like that.
And you could use that funding for purchase or does that come out of another?
And it could be for anything.
Anything in the preserve
As long
sounds.
as it's within the amount.
CMC would approve that.
Yep, of course. Yeah, I don't know if that's once the plan officially passes, then there's all that other extra stewardship.
Right, however, the state has.
Yeah, crazy amount. Yeah, so. It's also. Yeah, and then, I do want to just say, the revenue that comes from that would come from this operation, stand 10, is inconsequential. It's really just a benefit. It's not, does not factor in the prescription, does not factor into how the trees are marked. It is just a tangential benefit. We're fortunate enough that we can utilize, first of all, that we get paid to do this habitat work, and that we can, again, utilize that for invasive work or bridge work or trail work, whatever we want to. It's we're fortunate. The wildlife division, I don't know if anyone here knows, but so we have state parks, we have state forests, we also have wildlife management areas, which are, they may be forest, they may be salt marsh, they may be floodplains, that kind of thing. They're managed a little bit differently than state forests are. And they do a lot of mowing, they do some prescribed burns, but like a lot of the habitat work that they do costs them, tens of thousands, about hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're kind of fortunate in that the level we're doing the work that we don't have to pay that, we actually get paid for it and invest. So just a side note there. Yeah. And then the last thing, Chris, you asked about the emergency plan. That's like way above my head. So I got nothing to really tell you about that. That's that you got to talk to Brian and Will and Carl about that. That's
Okay.
I know it's a requirement, and I know it's come up. It was, I don't know, half the public comments were like, where's this emergency plan? I'm the forest guy, not the emergency plan.
But I am assuming correctly, right, that you would have to engage local fire departments to help battle
Yeah.
forest fires.
I would, yes, and, you know, essentially, yeah, fire, emergency rescue, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, I haven't really read the fine print on what it entails in the easement.
It just says that one will be done and put in place before, as part of the management plan.
Right, and, you know, I'm not even sure, quite frankly, is that on us, or is that on TNC, or is that on CMC? I don't even really know who's supposed to technically author that.
Well, it doesn't say, but I mean, you know, it just makes sense that the three towns would talk about how they're gonna manage emergencies.
Yeah. Well, you know,
And with you and the state.
Well, I think it's something we need to bring up to CMC. Maybe it's something that they engage the three emergency departments and maybe they come up with that plan as well.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah, that it's certainly something for the next CMC. I mean, okay, yeah, I just. Not.
because I would imagine it, but before the public meeting for stand 10, it would be beneficial to say there is such a thing in the works.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that was it for your questions.
Did you answer the issue about herbicides?
Oh, so herbicides, you know, be happy to discuss it. You know, again, these are not, every stand would be done, or every area of invasives would be done differently. You know,
Yeah,
you have issues getting input from, you know, if some of these stands or some of these treatments are very close to people's houses, certainly factor that in. As you stated, though, the herbicides, at least the main two that typically get used, have an exceedingly short half-life. I believe it's somewhere between 50 and 60 days in the soil, pretty weak. I understand the concerns, of course. But that would be essentially something that, again, I would create the RFP, the map, and then it would go to the CMC, and that's kind of where we can discuss that, you know, if someone wanted to say, hey, this is like near my house. Or, you know, if there were significant, if it was near running water, that kind of thing, we could talk about it then. So, and again, not every one of these has to be herbicide treatments. Some of them, again, like the spurge, you know, anything about spurge, if we want it to go away, it just has to be hit with herbicides. This stuff is as insidious as it gets, but yeah, so it's kind of an individual, you know, cross that bridge when we come to it, for each stand kind of thing.
yep. Yeah, there is an aquifer protection area in the southeastern area of the preserve, but that's not in stand 10.
Else?
If we were to do that herbicides, we would put up warnings like,
Yes,
and
yeah,
homeowner has to do.
we put up a bunch of signs, huge signs.
To identify them.
I think we just have, I'm trying to visualize our signs, they're basically just like spelling across.
Herbicides
Pesticide.
used here.
Yeah,
I was wondering, because they're,
we tend to not use anything, crazy. It's generally, like say, or triclopyr. We, except with some rare examples, where a Mazapir, there's a few other, I don't know if you're familiar with the, you know, caution, warning, danger labels. We try to stay away from future labels. And those are generally reserved for like bamboo or Japanese, running bamboo or mugwort, which are much harder to kill. Especially bamboo.
no, wait.
Well, mugwort, yeah, both.
Not on our top 10 list, I'll tell you that one.
Well, I don't, if you've ever tried to take out bamboo with herbicides, it's astonishing. But, so generally, it is those first two, triclopyr and glyphosate, and we do sign everywhere, around the area that's treated.
I was just looking at it from, how much dog walking we have in the park and everything, and just because we say, you know, herbicide use here, and, kind of dumbing it down to a person that may say, oh, herbicide, that's not good, but maybe we should say caution,
It, they
you know.
say, I think, keep out kind of thing,
Okay.
yeah,
Alright,
and, you know.
Will the trails be shut down during operation?
Depends on, you know, it's kind of a case by case, yeah, you know, if it's somewhere in the middle of nowhere, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, why bother?
yeah, but if it's, I'm trying to think of this, like, if it's near.
Well, stand 10 pretty much encompasses the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is there,
White,
is there a
so-
treatment herbicide treatment for 10? I can't
It's,
remember. Cause I know there's a bunch like around on the, like near pool set. and there's a
said,
ton of others.
stands and invasive plant treatments. And then it said 20 acres.
Pretty much it says, develop protocols with the town of, with mowing. That was still grass, roads, that's still grass. And
Yeah.
on page
Yeah.
58
So,
is also,
well, I can see here too under health, you know, he's got some patches, Japanese barberry, and I assume that's generally. You know, he's 20 acres. So on that kind of case, yeah, treating invasive plants, especially barberry and stilt grass is a tough one, very hard to eliminate.
Yeah, there's a significant amount of barberry in stand 10.
Yeah,
Kathy Conley and the crew that were employed removed a significant portion, but there's a lot of barberry there and stiltgrass.
Yeah.
And the spurge.
yeah, the spurge is awful. So, I mean, you know, in an effort to really reduce the herbicide footprint, in some cases like that, 20 acres, we may deem it a better use of our time or better use of chemicals to have that mowed and then the following spring or that fall really hit the sprouts just with a backpack sprayer as opposed to, you know, general mist blowing. You know, a lot more targeted, a lot less chemical, that kind of thing. And you know, that's something we will routinely do. Generally, we don't go to extreme measures like mist blowing, unless, you know, you're in one of those kind of areas where it's just wall to wall, multi-floor rows, barberry, you know, autumn olive, that kind of thing. Yeah, it may be very easy for us to combine a mechanical and a herbicide treatment into one and really kind of minimize the footprint, the foliage that any dog running around might run through, that kind of thing. So it's, yeah, it's really the way to go, in terms of bang for your buck. I don't like herbicides as much as the next person, but it's an unfortunate reality. Not a lot of people like to spend days of their life ripping barberry up. It's not a whole lot of fun. So, and it also costs a lot of money if you want to contract it out. Yeah, a ton.
Mhm.
So,
well. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
I think that more than educated us on what we were thinking, so, it's helpful. It makes us see clearer path, I think.
yeah.
And, you know, this is all new to us, so you gotta bear with us sometimes
Oh, no,
with all
no
this
problem.
good stuff, so,
Yeah.
um,
Well, like I said, remember, nothing really will happen until after post-May, because acoustic monitoring has to happen. I will put it first on the docket for May 15th. Yeah, so the 3 to 6 months before. I'll probably do the inventory this spring and have the plan written kind of, but nothing can be presented until the NDPP and acoustic monitoring. is completed.
I have 3 other items, if I can, while we have you.
Yeah, fire away.
Real quickly, who most likely would be, if you could share with us, the group of contractors that would be doing the work?
That's a tough one, for 2 different reasons. That's a tough one. The variability of what's essentially going to be tallied, what the trees are. You get a different suite of people.
I see.
And generally in this area, well, actually, there's really three factors, because markets dictate essentially how far contractors are willing to drive
Mm-hmm.
on a property. There's really two local mills, one in Guilford, and there used to be one in Durham that shut down very recently, that specialized in railroad ties, which, if I'm being frank, is very likely more the kind of material that would be removed from this area of the reserve, kind of a lower quality, you've walked out there, very thin soils, not the tallest trees, nothing like the tulip you see growing, the red oak growing in the lowlands. It's, beautiful, beautiful trees. So it's pretty variable. We have a bid list, or we have a list of people that we won't accept bids from. And then we have kind of it's put out publicly, so theoretically anybody can bid on it. It's not an exceedingly long list of contractors. It's probably, I would say, 15 to 20 different organizations across the entire state. And some of those are from New Hampshire, Vermont, and Rhode Island. They generally kind of peck at the corners. I'm assuming they're not coming down the Fort Saybrook or anything like that. It would more than likely be someone kind of more local than that, but it's very hard for me to say.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping, is that it could be a local or nearby contractor. The other question that we've asked you before, which would be helpful as we plan the trail system, is the goal in the forest management plan is that we reduce the number of trails in order to meet the Massachusetts standards.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could, because we have within the CPA, we have the issues within the CPAs to reduce those, as well as outside of the CPAs.
Yeah.
And to remove trails that are within the 100-foot envelope of the vernal pools. But what would be helpful is if you can calculate
How much would have to be removed?
how many miles of trails, or I'm not sure exactly what measurement, how many we have to reduce to meet the goal.
I could do that. I'm gonna guess the end product probably would not be entirely exact, because, the trails are already finite lengths, so we'd have to kind of workshop it a little bit.
Right, right.
I'd be able to determine what type of, metric or I could quantify how many kilometers, it's measured kilometers.
Yes.
That would need to be removed in the CPA and outside of the CPA to then
Yes.
meet those criteria. I can do that.
That would be very helpful to know what our goals are and what we're shooting for to meet the goals.
I could do that.
So what about the Massachusetts program?
What's appealing is, so I wish we had one in the state. I was actually in an all-day meeting today, division meeting, and this kind of came up that we don't have, like, I think New Hampshire has guidelines. Massachusetts has guidelines, or BMPs, they're not guidelines, they're really best management practices. We don't have them, but Massachusetts is really geographically and forest composition wise closest to us. So that's why we utilize it. And Mass DCR, large organization like Connecticut DEP, and that it's a document that really was worked on by wildlife biologists and foresters, a whole lot of people. It's a really robust document, and it's factors, tons of factors go into it, but I personally find that the densities they recommend are pretty, I would say would be very beneficial anywhere, but they factor in this trails effect on ground nesting birds and corridor of influence, which is kind of another study. I believe that's also fair, but so we don't have our own, so that's why we use theirs. I wish we had our own. I suggested that today, but might not. You never know. We could just adopt theirs and call it ours, which would be fine. But you'd also have to you have to factor in, how many, our population versus public lands mass has more public lands than we do, and so that honestly, we may want more scrutinous, metrics for our, so it's a big discussion, but, that's why we use Massachusetts.
The last thing is just, it would be good if we could get your presentation from the December 18th CMC on the second round comments. We haven't received the second round comments.
I'm writing it down.
And that's it.
No, are those comments like, when I said, are those comments like that I said, or what are people? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 9 comments.
I got it.
I got it. You sent
I sent it to you.
Yeah.
I sent it.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Alex. That's all we got for you.
Anytime.
We wanted to make sure you're driving here and spending all this time with us.
No,
So where are you driving?
I haven't.
Oh, that's it.
No,
No, I think they said the bridge is.
I'm on this
Stay
side.
tuned.
I'm on this side.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm in Hagan technically,
Oh,
but when I,
okay.
I just.
So-
Same thing.
We just have a few more things on the agenda, and I'm gonna go through them quickly because we're in the essence of time here, since it's already 7:30. The public use plan, we've already known, and we're gonna email Kim and her boss and
Please.
go on with that one, so. Last meeting, we discussed the why with trail closure signs, so I just. Literally, this was a sign that we, in your packet, that we use with Essex Land Trust and the Essex portion of the trails. Working on a green portion. It's the why, so we're gonna come up with a why on our trail closure signs, and kind of educate that. So this is exactly what we used when we did that project up there. Yeah, I think it's a good thing, so I just want to give an example of what we were talking about, and we'll come up, Chris has other trail closure signs, but we can come up with a new why on them. So I think that'll be really easy.
I think they may be a couple different reasons.
Of course, yeah, but that was one of the signs that we already had used.
Yeah.
It's, I know it's not in color, it's red on the top, white on the bottom, so that was that. And the Eversource mitigation discussion. Last meeting in November, we had talked about our particular plans that we wanted to give forth to Eversource with our planting plan. I particularly have not gone any further on mine. Sheridan is not here. So I really just want to table this till next month. I don't know if you got any further on that. So,
Well, I have, the species that we talked about in the November one was cedar, dogwood, things like that, around the new parking lot and in the hill road. But I went back now that most of the vegetation is down and, there was only, a half inch of snow on the ground. It's just so rocky there, I just wanted to do it as a visual blockage so that you don't see the houses on the other side. Especially times like this, you can see the houses, and I just wanted to try to put something there that was gonna be low growing. Hopefully, maybe one back there to move a rock and we can put something, and just put it there, but it wouldn't be anything new, there's never a city out there. I personally was talking about Laurel because I know they're doing all the time, and I'm looking at it this time of year. And yeah, you can see right into somebody's backyard, which is why we changed the trail to begin with, so that people didn't want to go down into it. And I'm still gonna, just about it, it's really what the blocks and part of things that allow us.
well, we'll talk more about that next week.
All right.
We'll get a better plan for everyone, certainly when everyone else is here. So. Is there any other new business?
Other than having that Saturday meeting, tremendous turnout from the town. Exciting. And we have a lot of people talking and a lot of people very much interested in being volunteers for whatever, not just hacking and sawing and cutting.
Yeah.
Just being there as educators, which was really positive. And perhaps the next one that we have, that you know, like the state, so that they can see what the
He,
state.
actually,
Yeah, I
he
was
was gonna
right.
make it and then
Yeah,
something
I
came
could
up
not-
and
Yeah, that's okay,
we had no room for you.
yeah, technically, no, really, a little bit scary, can't keep all the doors open, just not sure, but, no, I mean, and I think that people would be very much interested in seeing what the state does and how you, work with volunteers and, hopefully, new students.
Sure. Perfect. Anything else from anyone? Make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that, well,
All
I'll
right,
second it,
all
I'll
right.
second it, Liz will make that.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
All righty.